Well, we have, over the past few weeks, been imagining that our life is a house that Jesus lives in. We've given Jesus access to every room in our spiritual house. Not only have we given him access, we're actually inviting him to enter each room and to help us clean, remodel, redecorate, and refurnish those rooms. Now, how many of you wish you could get Jesus to come help you do that in your real house? Come clean out your closets, and maybe you have a remodel project that needs to be done, and you just don't know what you're doing, and you can say, Jesus, come and fix my house for me. Well, he can help you with those kinds of things, not in the same way, though, but we're asking him to do that in our spiritual houses. We don't want to have anything in our lives that would be offensive to him and make him uncomfortable. So we started by Christ to go into the basement of our house with us and to help examine the foundation. We learned that the right foundation is not simply just asking Jesus to live in us. In the parable of the wise and foolish builders, Jesus said that firm foundation is building our lives according to his commands. It's not just saying, Jesus, come live in me. He said the wise builder who built his house on the firm foundation was the one who heard his teachings and obeyed them. It's not enough to simply select the right architect or purchase the right blueprints. We have to follow the plans as they're given if we want the house to turn out the way it's supposed to turn out. When we cut corners and don't use the proper materials, or we don't reinforce things the way they were on the plans, the foundation is not strong enough, and no matter how good the rest of the house looks, when the storms of life come, that house will crumble. It's not enough to start preparing the foundation when you see the storm coming, because you'll never get it in time. You can't wait until after the storm has passed. The foundation has to be built properly prior to the storm. And Jesus said the storms will come. He didn't say in case the storms come. He said they will come. We need to be prepared for those storms by having our house built on the proper foundation, following the commands of Jesus Christ. Besides the basement, we've invited Christ to examine our spiritual kitchen, the library or study, and the rec room. We asked him to help us throw out the things in those rooms that aren't pure or right. We asked him to help him evaluate how we spend our time. Are we spending our free time doing things that would please him? Things that he would gladly do with us? Or are we saying, hey, you can't have this area of my life. This is off limits. This is something I'm going to do my own. Jesus, I'll meet in church again on Sunday, but leave me alone right now because I want to do something else that I know you wouldn't approve of. Are we doing things that actually accomplish something? Or are we simply wasting time? And that's part of what we've talked about so far. Today, we're going to visit the workshop of our house. Now, many of you probably, in fact, most of you in this room probably don't have a workshop in your home. I look out and I see a few of you that do. Maybe it's not an actual workshop, but at least some kind of a space where you do your work. You have your tools there, and that's where you repair things, and that's where you make things. There was a time years ago when almost every house or every household had some kind of a workshop. Maybe it was in the garage. Maybe it was in the basement. Maybe it was a separate building. But every house had something that would be considered a workshop. My dad, when I was growing up, had a workshop in the basement. And he would tinker with a lot of stuff down there, repairing a lot of stuff, building a lot of stuff. He saved a lot of money by fixing things that were broken instead of having to go out and buy them over again, or sometimes making something because he thought he could make it better and make it cheaper than going out and purchasing something. Today, a lot of people don't have workshops because we buy things and we almost consider them to be disposable when we buy them. We say, well, if I get 3 or 4 years out of this, that's great, and then I'll just get a new one. And sometimes the technology has changed so quickly that in 3 or 4 years, we're ready for a new one anyway because the new one has more features than that one had. Well, a lot of times we can fix it for less money than we can repair it. And too many of us don't know what we're doing when it comes to repairing something, and we don't have the tools. I remember one time I decided I was going to tune up one of my cars myself. And so I went and I bought all the parts I needed to tune up the car. But then I found out I didn't have some of the tools that I needed to tune up the car because the spark plugs weren't on top where they're supposed to be. They were buried underneath the engine. So I had to get some sockets that had extensions and swivels and all that kind of stuff. And then because the spark plugs were down there and they were tight, I ended up breaking one of the spark plug wires as I tried to pull it out. And you couldn't buy just one spark plug wire. You had to buy a whole set of spark plug wires. And by the time I got done, I had 3 times more money invested in tuning up my car than I could have had it done up at the corner shop. And then I said, that's it. I'm not tuning up my cars anymore. I'm taking them to somebody else. I mean, back in the old days, cars were easy. They're complicated now. You have to almost have a degree to do it. So a lot of people don't have workshops anymore. But in our spiritual house, we do have a workshop. Maybe for you, instead of a workshop, you have a hobby room. A hobby room is similar to a workshop. You go there to do projects, to do things. But a hobby room usually is just another way of spending our free time. It's something we enjoy doing. And a lot of times we have hobbies where we're constantly doing something, constantly making something, but we don't even know what we're going to do with it when we're done with it. And so it becomes actually a collection of all these things. You know, I mean, we do jigsaw puzzles and then we frame them and we put them up on the wall. Well, how many pictures do you need on your wall? Or you have to just destroy and put them back in a box and do them again or something. You know, hobbies are something to do, but they're really not producing something, usually, that's absolutely necessary, something that can be used. In a workshop, things are made from scratch, or broken things are useful again. We want to talk about our spiritual workshop. In our spiritual house, the workshop represents the things that we do. More specifically, the things we do that matter. If we really think about all the things we do every day, how many of the things that we end up doing throughout the day really matter when it actually comes right down to it? The Bible has a lot to say about how we spend our time and what we should be doing. There are many Christians that spend all their time simply trying to avoid doing the wrong things. You know, there's all these things I shouldn't do, so I'm not going to go to these places and I'm not going to watch these things. And we've talked a little bit about that because that's important. There are things that we shouldn't be doing, but some people spend all their time trying to avoid doing those wrong things, and they define the Christian life in negative terms. We describe Christianity by talking about what it's not, or what a Christian should not do. A Christian shouldn't do this. A Christian shouldn't do that. My mom taught me a saying when I was little. Maybe some of you heard this saying. She had this saying that said, I don't smoke, I don't chew, and I don't go out with girls that do. That's the way we used to view Christianity. It's the things that I don't do. And if you're a Christian, you won't do those things. We think we're a Christian, or we think somebody's a Christian because they don't do something. Oh, they must be a Christian because they don't go to that kind of place. They must be a Christian because they don't do that particular activity. There are many things that a Christian shouldn't do, but simply avoiding those things is not good enough. Did you know there are more scriptures in the Bible that tell us what we should do than there are that tell us what we shouldn't do? And I heard a preacher one time when I was younger. He said before he became a Christian, he said, I could never be a Christian because there are too many things in there that I can't do, and I know I'm going to fail. I know I'm going to end up blowing it. I'm going to end up doing one of those things I shouldn't do. But he said once he became a Christian and started reading the Bible, he found out there are more do's than there are don'ts. And he learned that if he just focused on the do's, he wouldn't have time to worry about the don'ts. So he started reading the Bible differently. He started reading it. What should I be doing instead of what should I be avoiding? When we stand before Christ on the judgment day, we're not going to be rewarded for the things we didn't do. He's not going to say, congratulations, you didn't go there. Congratulations, you didn't do that. Nowhere in the Bible does it say he's ever going to ask us what we didn't do. But he is going to ask us what we did. In fact, he's not going to have to ask us because he's already going to have a record of what we did. And it says we will be rewarded for what we did. Jesus didn't tell any parables that end with the words, well avoided, good and faithful servant. However, he told many parables that have the words, well done, good and faithful servant. We're called servants. A servant's job is to do something. How many servants get hired for what they can't do or what they don't do? A servant's job is to do, and that's our job as believers. We should be doing. Jesus told a couple of different parables about a master who gave his servants a task to do. One of the parables is in Matthew chapter 14, and the other is in Luke chapter 19. Both the parables are similar. In both of the stories, the master is going on a trip and gives his servants some money to invest for him while he is gone. One of the stories talks about minas. The other talks about talents. And the talents is where we get our English word of talents, because we don't talk about money now in minas and talents and shekels and that kind of stuff. We talk about dollars and things like that. But the word talent, in that story, it said the master gave to each servant a certain number of talents according to their ability. The master knew what they were capable of using, so he gave to them according to their ability. And so when the English language was created, they took that talent, and we now use it as ability. We all have talents. We all have abilities. Our abilities were given to us by our master, by Jesus Christ, because he knew what we could handle, what we could do. But in these stories, it's talking about money. It goes beyond money, but that's what the story is specifically talking about. In both stories, the servants are given a certain amount. In the parable of Luke, there were 10 servants, and each servant got the same amount. Each of them got 1 mina. In the parable of Matthew, there were only 3 servants, and each one was given a different amount. One got 10, one got 2, one got 1. But they were all given something. And at the end of the stories, they end the same way. The master came back, and they had to give a report to him of what they had done with what they were given. The master didn't come and ask them what they didn't do while he was gone. He said, "What did you do with what I've given you?" Both stories had those who did what they were supposed to do. They took what the master had given them and used it wisely. They multiplied what they had been given and brought all the increase back to the master. It wasn't theirs, it was his. They knew that. They knew that they would have to give it back to him. It was never theirs in the first place. These servants heard the words, "Well done." They were rewarded for their work. However, each of those stories also had one servant who did nothing at all. Instead of the words, "Well done," those servants heard the words, "You wicked servant." You wicked servant. Why were they called wicked? Was it because wicked? Had they been? Had they done something they weren't supposed to do? It had nothing to do with what they had done. They were called wicked because they hadn't done something. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. My question every time I read those stories is, so what did they do? We know they didn't invest the money. We know they didn't do what the master wanted them to do. What did they do? All those extra hours they had because they weren't doing what they were supposed to do, what were they doing? It doesn't tell us they were doing something wrong. What they were doing were probably good things, or at least, not bad things. I mean, they were having fun with their friends. They were, doing okay stuff. It's just they weren't doing the right things. One day, each of us will stand before God. And the main thing we're going to be judged for when we stand before God is, what did we do with Jesus? Did we accept Jesus Christ? Did we make him Lord and Savior of our lives? That's the main thing will be judged for is what did we do with Jesus? Did we accept him or did we reject him? Those who accepted Christ will inherit eternal life. Those who reject him will inherit eternal damnation. But there's more to the judgment than simply whether or not we accepted Christ. Sometimes we forget about this part. We don't want to concentrate. We just say, okay, I'm there. I'm going to make it. I accepted Jesus. I'm going to make it. But there's more to it. I want you to look closely with me to what's written in Revelation chapter 20. Revelation chapter 20, verses 11 through 13 says this. Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. The earth and the heavens fled from his presence, and there was no place for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged according to what they had, what does it say? Done. They were judged according to what they had done. Not what they hadn't done, what they had done. As recorded in the books. The sea gave up the dead who were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what they had done. Twice. They were judged by what they had done. The books didn't come out and say, okay, I've got the book of undones here. Let me see. Did you not do the things you weren't supposed to? Did you avoid these places? Did you not hang out with these kinds of people? Let's see if you followed all the don'ts. The books recorded the do's. Did you do what you were supposed to do? And every time you did what you were supposed to do, it was recorded. And those things come out. And there are rewards given for what we've done. Nowhere does it say in the Bible we're going to be asked what we didn't do. We will be judged according to what we have done. And it isn't just talking about the bad things we've done. The Bible's clear that we receive rewards for the good things. We receive rewards for doing the right things. Once we accept Christ, we become his servants or his ambassadors. A servant or an ambassador has a job to do. And they're rated on how well they do their job. Are we doing what we're supposed to do? Are we doing the things that our master has given us to do? That's what we're going to be judged for. You don't believe me? Let me give you, there's many, I can give you a lot more. So let me give you just a bunch of scriptures right here. And there's many, many more in there to talk about this. Psalm 62:12 says, with you, Lord, is unfailing love, and you reward everyone according to what they have done. Proverbs 19:17, whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. Jeremiah 32:12, great are your purposes, mighty are your deeds. Your eyes are open to the ways of all mankind. You reward each person according to their conduct and as their deeds deserve. Matthew 16:27, for the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels. Then he will reward each person according to what they have done. Ephesians 6:8, because you know that the Lord will reward each one for whatever good they do, whether they are slave or free. Revelations 22:12, look, I am coming soon. My reward is with me, and I will give to each person according to what they have done. The Christian life is not about what we should not be doing. It's about what we should be doing. Are we doing what he has given us to do? We are all doing something. We're like that wicked servant. He had to be doing something unless he was just sleeping his time away, and I guess some people do that. But most of us are doing something. The question is, are we doing something that matters? Are we doing things that will matter in eternity? Because a lot of times in our hobby room, we're doing things, but we don't even know what we're going to do with them when we're done with them. They're just going to collect in a closet somewhere, and eventually our kids are going to have to figure out how to get rid of them, because our kids sometimes don't share our hobbies. Amen? My grandfather was very, very handy with his hands. He had a workshop. In fact, the whole basement of his house was a workshop. He had all the right tools and stuff. And he was good. He didn't even need the fancy. He had some fancy tools, but he was good with a pocket knife and with a chisel. My grandfather actually made 3 violins from scratch. He got the plans from Stradivarius, and he got my dad had cut down a sycamore tree, and I guess that's supposed to be the best kind of wood for violins, and my grandfather took some blocks of that sycamore tree, and he set them outside, and he let them age for the proper period of time, and then with his tools, he fashioned it, got everything the right dimensions and the right shape, and built 3 violins by hand. They were awesome. He kept one. He gave one to my sister, or actually one to each of my sisters. They loved them. They played them. That was great. But is that really going to matter on Judgment Day? Is he going to get a pat on the back? I'm just so proud of you. You made violins for your granddaughters. It was great, and I'm not saying it was wrong. But that doesn't matter in eternity. My grandfather took a matchstick, a regular wooden matchstick, and with his pocket knife, whittled it out and made an actual chain with links. An actual chain out of a matchstick. He could take a block of 2x4, and with his knife, he would carve pliers that actually opened and closed. And he had one set of pliers that he made that was out of a block of wood about that big, and he made a big set of pliers. Out of the handles of that set of pliers, he made 2 more sets of pliers. And out of the handles of that, he made 2 more sets of pliers. And this whole thing opened up with all these pliers on it. Did that all with a knife and had the hinges and everything working. He was incredible with doing. My grandfather could make anything. He'd go down to the store and he'd see something and he'd say, I can do that. He knew how to work with wood. He knew how to work with plastic. He knew how to work with metal. He would just go and see something. I can make that. And he'd take measurements. You know, sometimes I think the stores were wondering was he's in there with a tape measure, measuring things out and writing stuff down on his tab. And then he'd go home and he'd duplicate it in his workshop. Was there something wrong with that? Was he wrong to enjoy working with his hands and enjoy doing something? No. He wasn't doing something bad. In fact, we still enjoy some of those things. We have some of those things that he made, and we can look at them. We can remember our grandfather by those. But in eternity, those things really aren't going to matter. But you know what? My grandfather also used his skills for God. There were times when he would use his skills to repair something for somebody else. So, a widow lady in the church, would have something break, and he would use his skills to go repair it for her because she didn't have the money to repair it on her own. When this church would have a work day, he would come and he would be there for the work day using his skills to help improve the church or help repair something at the church that had broken. Those are the things that will matter in eternity. The other things weren't bad. But he knew, I can't just use these for me. There are times when I'll use these for me and I'll enjoy it because I enjoy doing these things. But whenever I have an opportunity, I'm going to use my skills. I'm going to use my talents. I'm going to do something that matters. Something that will receive, and he wasn't doing it for the rewards. But he did know that these talents were given to me by God. And I need to take every opportunity I can to not use them simply for myself, but to use them, to give them back to God. There are a lot of things that we do every day. Most of them aren't bad. But how many of them will actually be recognized on Judgment Day? Some of our deeds might get plenty of recognition here on earth. People will say, oh, you're the greatest. Whatever. They may pay us good money because we're using our talents. But will they be recognized by God? Were we using them? And nothing wrong with making a career out of our talents. There's nothing wrong with that. But the real reason they're given to us is to invest in the kingdom of God. I want to end with a poem by a missionary, C.T. Studd. It's titled, Only One Life. It says, 2 little lines I heard one day, traveling along life's busy way, bringing conviction to my heart, and from my mind would not depart. Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Only one life, yes, only one. Soon will its fleeting hours be done. Then in that day my Lord to meet and stand before his judgment seat. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Only one life, the still small voice, gently pleads for a better choice, bidding me selfish aims to leave, and to God's holy will to cleave. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Only one life, a few brief years, each with its burdens, hopes, and fears, each with its clays I must fulfill, living for self or in his will. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. When this bright world would tempt me sore, when Satan would a victory score, when self would seek to have its way, then help me, Lord, with joy to say, only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Give me, Father, a purpose deep. In joy or sorrow, thy word to keep. Faithful and true, whate'er the strife, pleasing thee in my daily life. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Oh, let my love with fervor burn, and from the world now let me turn, living for thee and thee alone, bringing thee pleasure on thy throne. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Only one life, yes, only one. Now let me say, thy will be done. And when at last I'll hear the call, I know I'll say it was worth it all. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. We only get one life. There are no do-overs. We don't get a second chance. How many people on their deathbed have said, I wish I would have. If you live your life for Christ, if everything you do is for him, and I know everything we do is not going to be, there are things we just have to do. But if we keep that in mind, and we always think, I enjoy doing this, but is there some way I could do this instead of just doing it for fun? Could I do this for a purpose? Could I be doing this for the kingdom of God? Could I be using my talents? Could I be using my gifts? Could I be working for the kingdom? Could I somehow use this to share the gospel message? Could I somehow use this to help someone who's in need? Jesus said, when you do this for the least of them, you've done it for him. It's only the things that we do for Christ that really matter. Do we have a hobby room in our hearts? or do we have a workshop? Are we working for Christ? Heavenly Father, I pray that you take the word this morning. And each week we've been praying the prayer that David prayed. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Father, this morning, right now, I pray that you would turn the searchlight on in our hearts. I pray that you begin to shine the light, and through our mind, help images of all that we do to flash before our mind. And I pray that you would show us which of those things count and which of those things don't. And not that any of them are bad. It's not that most of those things are going to keep us from going to heaven. But this life is short. And a lot of those things aren't going to matter when we stand before you. Show us where we can take the talents you've given us, and instead of burying them, actually using them, or instead of using them for ourselves, we would realize everything we have comes from you and we need to give it back to you. Show us how we can turn our hobby room into a workshop and to begin to produce things that really matter. We want you to be pleased with everything that comes from our life. And we will open our ears to hear what you speak to us today, because we love